Hello everyone, and welcome to our final set of talks for today's oneAPI Dev Summit. So the first lightning talk out of two that we have coming up before we close this evening is from the NAMD Scalable Molecular Dynamics program. We have David Hardy presenting. David is the lead developer at NAMD, and he has a PhD in computer science and received the Gordon Bell Special Prize in 2020 for some of his contributions to COVID-19 research. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Eleanor. Yes, so today I'd like to tell you about our work in NAMD, and I'd like to start by motivating why we're interested in this. Molecular dynamics provides biomedical researchers with a theoretical computational microscope that enables seeing dynamical atomistic details of biomolecules on time and length scales that are not accessible through experimental techniques alone. It provides scientific insight that can ultimately lead to improvements in human health. For example, understanding infection to assist developing drugs or other therapeutics. And some of the high-profile work that we've been involved with was in connection with this Gordon Bell Prize. It was the first all-atom simulations of the SARS-CoV-2 virus on the Frontera and Summit supercomputers. And so this was a collaboration that was headed by Romy Amaro's lab at UCSD. And really, this project involved over a zettaflop of NAMD simulation, most of which was trying to understand and characterize the COVID spike complex, the 8.5 million spike complex structure, which is the first point of contact of the virus with human cells. But it culminated with the assembly of the entire virion. And so this was a 305 million atom system that we scaled across 4,096 nodes of the Summit supercomputer at Oak Ridge. And we were awarded with a Gordon Bell Special Prize at SC20 for this work. And then next year, we followed up with continuing this collaboration, this time with the Delta variant of the SARS-CoV-2, embedded in an aerosol droplet that was made of lung surfactant. And so this is basically what a person would produce if they're infected and they cough. And so we were basically modeling the simulation, giving theoretical evidence to COVID being airborne. And again, we scaled this also up to 4,096 nodes of the Summit supercomputer. This program, NAMD, that's allowing us to do this is code that's been developed since the late 90s. It was written in C++ with Charm++ parallel objects. And in 2007, we started developing CUDA for NVIDIA devices. And then later, we continued with HIP for AMD devices via Hipify, and really just using the CUDA code kernels that we had already developed. And for the past 5 years, we've been developing oneAPI SYCL, and this should hopefully allow us to support all devices. With NAMD, the idea is that we're simulating the movements of biomolecules over time, and we're known for enabling parallel scaling. And so in this presentation, I'm going to demonstrate this with some large systems that we're then going to show the scaling of these systems over nodes of the Aurora supercomputer. So when we do molecular dynamics simulation, at its heart, we're integrating Newton's equations of motion. So this is F equals ma. But written as a second-order differential equation, where F is equal to the negative gradient of a scalar potential function. And so below, I've renamed this function E, and it's a function of terms that are bonded terms that represent the covalent bonds between nearby atoms, and then non-bonded terms between all pairs of atoms. And the non-bonded terms are include both the van der Waals forces and also the electrostatic forces. And so what we want to do then is integrate this equation for millions of time steps. And the most computationally intensive part of calculating forces at each time step ends up being the non-bonded forces. Now, these non-bonded forces, they fall off pretty quickly out beyond a cutoff distance. And so really what we're taking into account here is these interactions up to some fixed cutoff distance that we defined. For our force fields, it's about 12 angstroms. And then to account for the long-range electrostatics, we use a fast approximation algorithm that I'll refer to later on. So the parallelism for MD, or any kind of time-stepping method, it's limited to what you can do at each time step, since all the time steps have to be performed in sequence. And so you start by initializing particle positions, and then you take those positions and you calculate the forces between those particles, and you use those forces to update the positions, and then you're looping this for millions of time steps. And occasionally we will output reduced quantities like energy or temperature or pressure to monitor what the simulation is doing. And less frequently, we might take an entire snapshot of the trajectory, and in which case we can use that for analysis after the simulation's done, or we can even take all these frames and play them back as a movie. As we're doing these simulations, about 99% of the computational work is all wrapped up in the force calculation, and the rest of that has to do with the update of the positions. So when we're parallelizing this, first of all, it makes sense to parallelize this as a spatial decomposition of the atoms into, in NAMD, what we call these subdivisions as patches. And the patch size is chosen so that it's a little bit larger. The dimension of the patch is a little bit larger than the cutoff distance. And so you can really just consider the nearest neighboring patches when you're calculating the interactions between the atoms. NAMD had the nice innovation, and again, this is well known today, but this is back in the late 90s. This was kind of revolutionary. It was the idea of decomposing these patch-patch interaction into compute objects, and then considering these compute objects, these work objects that are representing the interactions between patches, as proper objects themselves that don't need to live where the patch necessarily lives. This gives us a lot more data that we can use to load balance for large-scale parallelism. And so taking a look at the workflow of NAMD, we have the integration of patches, and then we're at a time step, we're calculating non-bonded computes, bonded computes, and then this PME algorithm that accounts for the long-range forces. And the idea then is that we're offloading this force compute to the GPU. And so this is how GPUs come into play for a parallel NAMD simulation. And so really, we started down this path of adopting SYCL first and foremost to support the Argonne National Laboratory Aurora supercomputer, which is an Intel-based supercomputer that gets its computing power from the PVC GPUs. However, SYCL provides a number of advantages. It gives you a modern C++ interface to GPU devices with host-side code that is much simpler than OpenCL. And I guess most importantly, it's a vendor-neutral open standards language and library solution. And so we see this as a way of improving NAMD's code longevity by adopting an open standard like SYCL. And so we needed to do some work once we did our initial porting of the GPU offload kernels. And so here I'm just talking a little bit about that. But since I'm running short of time, I don't think I'm going to get into these details so much. But there was also a lot of effort that went into optimizing the first version of these kernels, and so to make it something that would run more effectively. And so since an application like NAMD is very latency sensitive, a lot of work had to be done with especially optimizing not just the kernels themselves, but the interaction between the host side code and the kernels. And so this sort of presents a work timeline that was done in collaboration with Intel and the dev tech that we've been working with at Intel to do these optimizations. So what's interesting is that we take something like the non-bonded forces to start with, and we get it optimized to a point, and we decide, okay, now we're going to also offload the PME charge spreading and force interpolation contributions. All of a sudden, we get a big performance regression, and we have to dig in and we have to figure out, what's the problem there? And so there was just a series of optimizations that we had to do. Then again, we had to do more optimizations to also implement NAMD's streaming mode for getting the forces back to the patches as quickly as we could, so we could continue with the next integration step. So there was a lot of work involved with this. And this work allowed us to improve the Intel oneAPI toolkits by providing some feedback to those teams. So we had some improvements to oneDPL, especially the sorting routines that we're trying to use from them. We also had some feedback for the MKL FFT team to improve the 3D FFT performance. And we've also had some work with the driver and runtime teams to reduce the L0 driver overhead and the SYCL kernel launch overhead. So finally, this culminated in the release of NAMD 2.15 Alpha 3 for Intel PVC. This presents the GPU offload support using this new Intel oneAPI SYCL code path, and it's available as a source code tarball or through our GitLab repository. And so there are special build and launch instructions on our website, and you're taken to the right web page if you go to our download link and you click on downloading that source tarball. That will actually take you to a supporting web page that provides a lot of information on building and how you should properly launch this. Now I can show you some of the benchmarks that we've been able to do. There was also some work from the Charm++ side of things from my colleague Eric Bohm. I mention him in particular because unfortunately I failed to add him to the acknowledgments at the end. So Eric Bohm, we're seeing your OFI improvements here. And so this just shows the improvements in scaling of Charm++ low-level runtime OFI support over building Charm++ for MPI. Here we're seeing the scaling of the 1 million atom STMV benchmark. And going to the next benchmark, since STMV is a periodic benchmark, we can create a 5x2x2 matrix out of this for a 20 STMV benchmark. And so this is just a nice way to produce synthetic benchmarks by taking a perfect cube and then tiling them in to make a much bigger periodic system. And so here I'm showing the difference between running here with 7 cores per rank versus 3 cores per rank. Now, I think I need to explain a little bit that Aurora has 6 PVC GPUs per node, supported by 2 Sapphire Rapid CPUs per node. The Sapphire Rapid CPUs each have 52 cores, and so for a total of 104 physical cores per node. However, the PVC GPUs, they're actually like a 2-die GPU, and so we need to address these as 2 different devices for NAMD. So we're actually running 12 ranks per core per node, and so that can, if you do the little math quickly, you see that, well, that can be supported by 8 cores per rank, and we're taking 1 core away for just the communication between the other ranks. And so that leaves 7 compute cores per rank. And so here I'm just showing the difference in running 7 compute cores per rank versus 3 compute cores per rank. And you can see at, fewer nodes, 7 cores definitely is running better. But what's interesting is that a lower core count per rank ends up catching up and bypassing the 7 cores per rank. And what really is happening here is that NAMD is running out of useful work to be able to scale across all those different resources when you get to this crossover point, which is, why the 3 cores per rank is actually winning when you get up to the large node counts. So just to wrap up with some ongoing challenges, now we're in the process of finishing the port of NAMD3's GPU resident code path to oneAPI SYCL. And so this will allow running really fast single GPU or single node simulations. And so this is a way of supporting smaller simulations on Aurora where we're wanting to scale out by running large ensembles of simulations. So you increase sampling by having a whole bunch of different copies of your simulation running at the same time. We also need to finish merging the SYCL development branch into the main branch, and we've got some conflicts of differences in PME, the host side PME code that's crept up over the years that we're working through. But really the biggest challenge going forward is managing separate code paths for CUDA and for SYCL. And so one approach here could be to refactor and merge the management code so that we're just maintaining separate kernels for each. But the question really is, could we, in fact, leverage the oneAPI SYCL for alternative vendor GPUs? We've had trouble building that in the past, and I think the last time we put some effort into this, the holdup for us was the oneMKL FFT support. But hopefully these are things that we can resolve going forward and start to produce, CUDA or HIP builds for using this oneAPI SYCL code path. So just a slide to acknowledge all the different people that have been contributing to this, especially the people that are working from the Intel and Argonne side of things. And the fact that Intel has provided funding to us as a oneAPI Center of Excellence for this work. So thank you very much for your time. I'm going to hand this back over to Eleanor now.